Hi, everyone. Welcome to Gray Area. I'm Rob Ingle, and I'm so excited to be here with the one and only Lefty, who is not only a great triple threat DJ, producer, and label boss, but just an all-around stand-up guy. And
hey, thanks a lot.
Most importantly, a cat dad, which we're going to get into
That's
a little
right.
bit later.
For sure.
Thanks for being here, Lefty.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here with you guys.
Yeah, of course. So want to kind of start off by, I guess you and I have known each other. We met earlier last year, and in the, I guess, relatively short time we've known each other, it's been so great to watch you just continually knock it out of the park with each successive release. I think everything that's coming out on Quincy Boy is really nailing that consciousness of the dance floor. It's really nailing the consciousness of the disco house category, which is a hard thing to do, right? There's a lot of disco house music out there today.
A lot, yes.
Yes, and you're really killing it. From
Thanks
having
a lot,
the BBC One radio track of the week and Party
yep.
People with your collaboration with Selena Fader that came out earlier last summer.
Oh yeah.
Other hits like Lightning. So just want to start off by saying congrats on the stellar year you've had, man.
Thank you very much. Wasn't an easy one, but I got it together.
Yes. Well, we will certainly get into some of the stuff that's happened more recently, but I think just to kind of kick us off for the Gray Area listeners who might not know you, might not know your style, and might not know what you're about, could you just take it all the way back to the beginning for us and talk a little bit about where and when and how your passion for music began?
Woo! All right.
Lofty question.
Lofty question. I mean, I know the answer though, because it goes way back to my childhood when I was very young. I have two older brothers, and they were super into music, and I got super into music definitely because of them. And this was in the 1980s, so a different time for music, right? A lot of hair metal. MTV had just come out. Hip hop was born. All these different things were happening, and I kind of, although I was younger, got to like see the whole thing kind of transform and absorb it. So I was super in love with music and like into all the arena concerts and like all these things were happening, and which was interesting. I think it was so cool because my parents are Spanish, right? My dad's from Spain, my mom's from Colombia. Like we didn't grow up with our parents like influencing us with like classic rock and all this stuff. They were into like Gypsy Kings and Juan Luis Guerra and all this stuff happening. So Julio Iglesias, all the Spanish music. So I guess we kind of had to find our own path, and I was definitely influenced by my brothers. And so they had instruments, they started playing, and then I started playing their instruments, when they were not around and breaking the rules. But it was like Step Brothers, the movie, where it's like, don't touch my drums. And that was definitely me, sick from home. I call, like, I'm not feeling well. I can't go to school today. I was like, fine, why don't you stay home? I got to run some errands. I'll be down there. Psh, psh, psh. So I got any time that I could, and I knew that I was obsessed with music from that point on.
Awesome. So I see a guitar right here.
Yes.
You just mentioned drums. What were some of those instruments that you would sneak away to get a little bit of practice on?
Yeah. So my oldest brother is still a drummer, incredible drummer. And he had like the big 1980s kit with like the two kick drums and the gong and everything. And then my other brother, the middle brother, was a guitar player. So he had an electric guitar and a classical guitar, and I started playing his instruments, and then I got a guitar. It was my first instrument.
Great. And did that, again, sneaking away, experimenting a little bit with some of their instruments, when and where, and was there like a singular seminal moment that actually turned into a little bit something more than that?
Like into a career?
Into maybe a first gig or a first...
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So here's what happened. Basically, this was when I was living in Connecticut, where I was born. I was born in Stamford, Connecticut. When I was 13, I got my very first guitar, and we moved to Florida that same year. So I'm in a new town. I'm in South Florida, Boca Raton, which was like just developing like crazy. Everybody from the tri-state area is moving down there in the early mid 90s. It's like 94. So we're in this like big new development, and there's all these new families there. So there's like tons of kids, and like I kind of didn't have that growing up because we lived in the woods. So like I didn't really have neighbors, So now there's like all these people here, and I just kind of found the kids that were into skateboarding, into punk music and metal and stuff or whatever. And we just started like, oh yeah, I play guitar too. I was like, damn, all right, let's do it. So I started playing some songs together. And then in high school, I started playing shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what were some of your first
10th
bands,
grade.
first gigs? Tell us about them.
Okay, so let me see. Me and my neighborhood friends started a band called On the Slot. I was a guitar player in it. And we played like local Battle of the Bands. And we won one, and then we broke up that same day and changed our name to Oriole Country. And then we started playing real shows. Then we started playing shows around West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, where the Hard Rock Casino is now. In Fort Lauderdale is actually a really awful town called Davie, Florida. And there used to be like a Nazi bar that had punk shows. And it was one of the only places to play. So we would go down there and like have to deal with that. But it was part of the scene of growing up in Florida in the late 90s, as you can imagine. But it was an interesting time. So yeah, we started playing shows then. And then I left that group and I started another band that became my first touring band in 1999.
And that was?
It was a band called Kite Flying Society. Kind of like little screamy yelly, kind of like Fugazi. Do you know Fugazi from like DC?
I've heard the name, and back in my college days, I definitely heard a few of their tracks. But
yeah, it was kind of in that lane, little like math rock, a little yell, a little lot of clean guitar and loud drums, you know, kind of stuff like that. We toured around in a van playing like punk houses and squat houses, sleeping on floors and playing in basements and like VFW halls, you know?
Yeah.
And doing all that. And it was a total vibe. I'm not going to lie. One of my favorite music projects I ever did. I mean, there's more. There's more after that. If you want me to keep going.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to hear about some of your other projects, but I'm also curious to hear if there was a moment where, you know, whether that was in your late teens, early 20s, where you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to be pursuing full time.
Oh, yeah. I knew it when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
When I was like loving Metallica, when I was like 10, 12 years old, I'd be in my room jamming out to a wall, playing along to my CD, like I'm in the band playing to a huge arena. I just, my imagination was there. I was like, this is where I need to be. I need to do this stuff. You know, I loved it so much. Music was my life, my passion. Like as soon as I started playing, I was like, this is easy. It comes natural to me. So I always had the desire to try to figure out one way to always be doing it. And I think that's been my drive, to be honest with you, because even after high school, doing my little punk tours, I would do it. Like I pursued a culinary arts degree. And working in that field, I'm a certified culinarian, a chef. And I would like work in Florida where it's seasonal, where everything closes in the summer. So I'd be like, great, I'm going to get a job and I'm going to make sure they're closed in the summer so I can go on tour and do the shows and then go back to my cooking, back to the music and do it all back and forth. So I always made sure I could always do music was always my driving point.
Yeah. Some good advice. And, you know, that culinary career certainly predates of Shefty certainly predates Lefty. But before Lefty, you had some pretty interesting experience in a pretty prolific band. So could you talk a little bit about your trajectory with that?
No doubt. Shortly after Kite Flying Society, basically, I ended up moving to New York in 2005. And I reconnected with a good friend of mine from high school who I used to kind of play some music with. Also into skateboarding and guitar, you know, we just like-minded individuals. We connected and we started playing music and it was a very different style. I didn't have that much money and I bought an acoustic guitar, so I started writing acoustic guitar music. And he's like, well, that's what I'm doing. So we shared it and then we started a project in New York. During that time, we started going out in the city. We were going to a bunch of parties and stuff. A lot of cool things were happening. It's a great time to be in New York City. Met so many interesting people and made a lot of new acquaintances and like new New York friends and a lot of East Coast people. Because there's like a lot of people that are like born and raised here that you end up meeting and like they have circles of friends and got into some interesting folks. And we met a guy named Gabe Saporta who was the singer of a band called Midtown through the drummer, Rob, who was my good friend and my neighbor in my first apartment. And he's like, Gabe's starting a new band. You should join his band. It's going to be called Cobra Starship. So my friend Ryland and I, who had the other project together, joined Cobra together as like a duo because they came to our shows. They were checking out the music and everything. And eventually we started doing that, which toured around the world for about 9 years, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
It's a long run.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit, briefly about what that experience was like? And then I would love to hear how that kind of segued into kind of the next phase of your career, which is as a DJ producer of dance music.
Yeah, they're almost parallel in a sense.
Okay.
But I'm going to take off my jacket really quick because I'm starting to get a little warm in here.
Please do.
Hang on. Alrighty. So this is where it gets interesting. So we joined Cobra, and Cobra starts touring a lot, right? And honestly, the first few years, there was one album. They started putting out albums pretty quick. And the whole time, honestly, being in that band was just constantly like, what's next? What can we work toward? And it's a lot of work constantly. It's once you're getting music on the radio, it's like every time you go on tour, you're going to like visit people at like sometimes 6 a.m. every morning in the cities, and you got to go to the after parties and do all that stuff too. It's like it's a whirlwind, it can be a lot. But it was really fun and really great, amazing thing to be part of. I mean, we did a lot of incredible things that a very small percentage of people get to do. So yeah, I mean, from some highlights, I guess. I think the biggest thing we did was opening for Justin Bieber on his South American tour of his first world tour.
Yeah.
Which was wild. And we played stadiums down there. We played the Rio Stadium. That's like 85,000 people, 2 nights in a row, sold out, which is like no experience I think I've ever had in my life. So that was something else. And we got to do a lot of TV spots. We did like a lot of the late night talk shows and a lot of the morning talk shows and got to do all sorts of television things and MTV VMAs. We got nominated for a VMA one year, and that was the year that Kanye did the Taylor Swift thing.
Oh,
to tap into pop culture a little bit. And we were sitting like right behind him when it happened. Pretty wild stuff. So that was just like a wild thing to be part of. However, during that time, the Bloghouse era of music was kicking strong and was something that me and my friend Ryland, who I joined Cobra with, were also very passionate about. Super into all the remixes happening. This is like the combination of like DJs and like indie music mixing together and making all this Bloghouse era.
Interesting.
Gold.
I'm going to stop you and ask what that is because I don't know what that is. So for anybody who else might not know what
yeah. I mean, Bloghouse is like the era of like the Justice first album. A lot of French touch stuff was really blowing up. I mean, bands like Cut Copy were getting remixed by like, tons of people, Miami Horror, like all these, there's like a big crossover, was happening, and like Disco House was really popping off, and like, there's a really aggressive Bloghouse scene, and there's some kind of more disco house side to it. So there's a lot of cool different things happening. Ed Banger Records, a lot of the French guys, I was super into back then. But yeah, that was a whole moment in time. So my friend and I were basically like, we should start doing some stuff like that. So we started making music in that style, and we started a secret project that we didn't attach our names to it because Cobra at this point, we were very well known. We didn't want like the Cobra fans to like this new project just because we were in it.
Yeah.
So we wanted to just make music, for the culture, for the people, and for fun, really, pretty much, And we started a project called Grave Robbers with no vowels. We started doing bootleg remixes of like a lot of random songs and started making originals and got a little buzz. We played a few shows and started doing that for a little bit. So that kind of started in like 2006, 2007, which is kind of right when the Bloghouse scene started really like popping off.
Okay.
Yeah. But we were DJing already. I mean, I started DJing technically. My first gig was in like 2004 in Miami before Cobra and all that stuff. So it was kind of easy for us to transition into DJ world, which Cobra also did to a certain degree. We would like play a show and then go do an after party and DJ in like 2010, 2009. A good time to be alive.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely a crucible of a lot of different sounds.
Yeah, there was a lot going on then, for sure.
So how did that, how did that portion of your career transition to where you're at now in the creation of your current brand and current venture, Lefty?
Yeah, so Cobra started getting into remixing, right? Because we were kind of getting really like involved in the DJ world. We did a really big like pop remix for Iconopop.
Yeah.
That like, charted and stuff like that. So we had this guy that was our booking agent for Cobra, and he got us some of these big remix opportunities. And so after Cobra had ended, I went to go do a writing session at a studio in this management's office, in Cobra's old manager's office. They had a big studio there. And I see this guy set up in there. He's got a desk and everything. I'm like, what are you doing here? That's crazy. He's like, oh yeah. I'm like, bringing my new management company in here. Are you still writing and remixing and stuff like that? I was like, yeah. I pretty much set out to do a career solely producing music. So after Cobra, I was like, I just want to be a full-time producer, songwriter. I got a publishing deal. I was like, I just want to do sessions and get cuts and just have that be my career in music. And I tell this guy that, and he's like, well, why don't you link up with some of my DJs? They need writers and top line writers and stuff like that. Maybe you can work with them. So I did. And I became really good friends with an act of his by the name of Solid Disco, who had some bangers back in like 2012, 2014. They're a really promising act that were super nasty guys, DJs, and producers. Really, really talented. And he was like, if you want to get back into it, maybe I can get you some remixes and stuff like that. So I was like, sure, I'll take their money. So I started doing remixes again for fun. And he's like, why don't you get a little project off the ground? Maybe I can help you get it started or whatever. So I did. And that's when I started Lefty. And that was at the very end of 2016.
Great. And talk a little bit about how Lefty's sound, how your sound has evolved over kind of the past, what is it, 9 years?
Oh, yeah. 8 years, something like that, I guess. Yeah, pushing. I don't know. I also missed like a good chunk of it. Anyway, it's been pages, man. There's been chapters. Yeah. There's been chapters. And it's changed. It has evolved. And I'm going to tell you about it because you just asked. So I guess when I started, I was really doing like, kind of like residual blog house, like disco house stuff, pumpy samples, big drops, big filter house, right? Which I feel like is what I have a reputation for, and I started doing that. And it was a vibe, but it was impossible in New York getting gigs and shit like that.
Yeah.
It was tough because like techno was getting huge. Mirage was just about to open up and like all the underground clubs in Brooklyn were just like techno or like big house, like warehouse house, It was impossible to kind of get any gigs. So when I first came out the gate, I was doing like filter house and I made some like indie dance, more vocal forward dance records and they did really well. And it put me on the map and I was like crushing the blog scene when I was kind of just still hanging on by a thread. And I did a lot of remixes that got me, some good notoriety and performed pretty well. But then I was like, all right, I really want to play out more than anything. Like I miss playing shows. I did it for so long. I was playing shows from 1999 till 2014. I did a little work for hire bass touring in between there. And I was like, I love playing shows, but like I love DJing more than I like playing in bands. Because playing in bands, it's really fun, but it's like very rehearsed, and like it's just not the same. DJing, you're just like freestyle. You're in total control. You can pivot when you need to. You can shock them. You can do something fun. You can have a lot of fun with it. A lot of creativity live on the spot, which is what I love about it. So yeah, where did I leave off before that? I just sidetracked a little bit.
Just started kind of wanting to kind of play out some more shows around New York and kind of the style that you were.
Yeah, so I started kind of looking into some new labels. Like I signed a deal with this label that was going to put out 8 singles. And they're like, listen, we're just going to like stream them out. And this was like 2018 into 2019. They're like, we think the way for you to succeed is to just keep a constant flow of releases. And you have some great records and you have some like that are not going to be as big, but it's good to keep the stream of music coming out. So I said, let's do it. So I signed this deal. I put out a bunch of records with these guys. They went really well, and that was really fun. And after that, I was like, all right, I need to like find labels like in the scene and like really get my notoriety there because I was doing well actually with, the public to a certain degree through the blogs and all this and that. But I feel like I wasn't like nobody knew me in the scene. Like I couldn't get any bookings and things like that. And like it was hard to get collabs and such. So eventually I set out to suss out some labels, and that's when I kind of got my first cut with Tool Room.
Yeah.
And Love and Other. And they signed 2 records, and I said, great. And this kind of started putting me on the map, and I was like, great, this is where I need to be. So I started kind of focusing my sound a little out of the indie dance lane and more just house, and kind of pushing into that. A little techie vibes, still keeping it funky, and like keeping my musicality in there, and like sampling my instruments, which I like to do a lot of. And just trying to kind of push into more of a lane that'll like put me in this spot that'll help me get more gigs and be where I want to be ultimately.
Yeah, that's really interesting because one of the questions that I had for you, and it's almost become a little bit cliche or rote nowadays to say like a DJ defies categorization. I've seen that written in so many DJ bios nowadays. Like everyone's trying to do everything, right? And in the time we've known each other, and one of the things that I really respect is that you go narrow and deep, and you've seemingly gone narrow and deep in that disco house category, that funky house category, and that is reflected, I think, in the quality of your releases. So could you talk a little bit about how you focus your sound over the recent years?
Well, I think the reason why I was excited to kind of take my label into more of like a just self-releasing aspect.
Yeah.
Is I think my curation is kind of just like based off of like what grabs me, you know? And it is kind of a narrow, field, if you will, because I'm just like, I can scroll through a million songs. I'll know right away when it's got that thing that grabs me, and that's it. And, I can hear it instantly.
Yeah. And I'm really interested to hear from your perspective. I moved to New York in 2016. So I have, and that, as you mentioned, was right when all these clubs were opening up, Brooklyn Mirage, elsewhere, things were migrating from Manhattan to Brooklyn. So that's right when I kind of got my entrance into this market too. And I'm really interested to hear from you how your sound has evolved, or how you've maybe pivoted or re-strategized, or maybe even just kept true to yourself, as especially in the past 2 to 3 years, disco is having this moment, right? I think back to pre-pandemic, I think back to those early days, and maybe I was just not looking in the right places, but I remember, disco nights not being quite as common, and now they're on every corner, every block, every club. If you go out any Friday night here in Greenpoint, Brooklyn.
Tons of disco.
How has that affected or changed, the trajectory of your career at all?
It's interesting because I don't talk about this, but I've definitely had these thoughts before.
Yeah.
And I haven't talked about this with anybody ever, but I kind of like felt like for a while I was like, my timeline, my personal timeline, and like what's the popular timeline, have a tough time syncing up. And I think it's because I'm getting to a point where I'm going to really lock it in.
Yeah.
And it's the evolution of it, it's building it and honing it into when the timing is right. I feel like when I came out, I was disco all day, right? And it was impossible. I was struggling. People in the industry knew me. I knew a bunch of people at all the big labels, my name was in the scene. And it was just impossible. They're like, this sound's not popular. We can't do anything with this. You can't get gigs. You don't fit the sound. That's it. Then I was like, all right, I really want to like, you look at social media, you see like these events happening. You're like, man, I want to be there. I want to be playing these shows. You see stuff all around the world and like all these crazy warehouses and stuff. And I'm just like, man, I want to be in there. How do I get into these gigs? Like I got to change my sound. I got to make my sound fit in there so it makes sense. It's the only way I'm going to get into that. So eventually I start pivoting. Disco becomes huge while I'm still doing it. And it's impossible at that point. Still, I feel like during the disco, kind of peaking or reaching or on its way there, everybody started doing it, and then it just became insanely competitive. So I'm like, great, now I got to compete against everybody else that's been doing it. Like older names that have been doing it forever that can do whatever and pivot with the scene always are just like, great, disco's the vibe now. Flip the switch. This is what we're doing. Now, now we're going to do that because that's what's popular. So, there's a lot of guys that have been doing disco forever that also got to thrive continuing to do it, which is also hard to compete with because they're bigger names. So. Yeah.
And that's really interesting perspective. And my next question for you was going to be, as disco has come into the mainstream, has that posed a challenge, or has that posed any ideas about how to kind of rise above the fray in that way, given that, as I mentioned at the top of our interview, so many people are trying to produce and emulate this sound, no hate to anybody if I have to hear one more Gimme 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 by Ava remix out, please play.
If I have to hear it out again,
please play something different, disco DJs. But I
that's the people, unfortunately.
I digress.
One sec.
Yeah.
A little liquid here. All right. Sorry about that.
But back to my question of being like, as disco house has become really popular, how have you, and you have, so as I mentioned, you absolutely have kind of risen above that fray. How have you started to think about your production style, your DJ style to really stand out in that crowd?
Okay, so the way I've tried to do it is to really just play great music that is not obvious cuts,
Sure.
To go and play a disco party that like you can play all these amazing songs and really take people on the journey and not have them know like what the songs you're playing, but love it and eventually catch on and be able to like maybe sing along a little bit. I feel like there's an art to that, and that's just in the curation process. But, you know, I think playing a disco party, it's just got to be really fun. You know, the energy's got to be good. The vibe's got to be good. You got to like, you can drop some things they know every now and again because people love to sing along when they're partying, you know, to music. And it's like, I get that, but like, I don't want to play like I go out here, disco DJs play like Bee Gees and stuff. I'm like, that's cool, but that's like, you know, it is what it
I
is.
think we're on the same page.
Yeah. I'd rather play like, you know, Horse Me Disco stuff, you know, or something like that. But
yeah, absolutely. And I want to kind of ask because one of kind of obviously the important aspects of your career now is the creation of your label Quincy Boy Records, named after. He just ran away a little bit ago, but you're beautiful. What is it? Not
exotic
English,
short hair.
Exotic short hair. Maybe he'll make an appearance soon. But that started in 2021, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
So you're coming up on year 3 now. And I believe you said in an interview that I read that you know, you kind of were just, you know, making music. You already had, you know, a name for yourself with releases like Tool Room, Basement Sounds, things like that, and many other places. So could you talk a little bit about the creation and the evolution of Quincy Boy over the past few years?
Yeah, totally. So I had these managers at the time, and they're like, "Listen, we think it would be a good idea for you to start your own label, just to self-release your own music, pitch records to other labels, see what you can land, and then in between, you just self-release stuff to keep a constant flow of releases because, you know, I got a lot of building and growth to do still with this project." I was totally down for it.
Yeah.
So I announced the label. We set it up. We got a great distribution set up with Create Music Group. And my manager's like, they're pumped on it. We make all these plans. And I announced the label. And all my friends and some of the followers that I don't know are like, yo, what's up with this? You're starting a disco house label. I want to be part of it. And I was like, oh, okay. There's like something here. And I was like, you know what? I feel like I have a lot of knowledge and experience in this industry, having a lot of time in the publishing world, dealing a lot with record labels, understanding royalties and all these things. I was like, I feel like it would be a really, because I mean, like a lot of young up and coming teachers are like, take my music. I don't care about the contract. I don't care what anything means. Just put it out.
Yeah.
I just don't want to self-release it, you know? So I was like, you know what? I think this would be a great opportunity to start a small label to put out some releases and do like really transparent deals and make it educational for them so that they know what they're getting into at least and understand how a record deal works and what that all means. So I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like I kind of really embraced it. I got really excited about it. It's the first thing in a while that had excited me besides starting my new project. So it felt really right to me. What had evolved eventually was my management's participation in that and my business relationship with them. So coming out of the pandemic, you know, we put out a few releases like year 1. They're pretty much fully involved up until the end of it. And then they were kind of just like fading out. And then we just like, all right, this isn't happening anymore. So they're cool. We're still cool and everything. But, you know, they just got busy with other things as the world started opening up. They had other jobs and they were like trying to manage me on the side, do the label. And the label is like a lot of work, you know, and requires a lot of resources. So we started doing that and I was really passionate about it. And, you know, I was like, you know, I think we should actually take this opportunity to put out more music than just my own stuff because I see a lot of potential there. I see a lot of like help to other people, good resources that I can offer. Like I have a licensing team that exclusively pitches our music for commercials and advertising. Like you don't get that from a lot of labels in dance world, you know? And they're like, we need dance stuff. We don't have any dance stuff. All we have is like indie rock and like pop music. And we get a lot of requests for background dance music. And sometimes it's like $5,000 or $10,000. Like, hey, I'm not mad at that. So they're pitching our catalog around and I just want to be able to offer more, you know?
Yeah.
So I got really into that. And then I had to pretty much do it all on my own, which was a daunting task to say the least. I, you know, had to learn fully about distribution and working with them on the releases, getting all the ducks in a row. And, you know, I do everything pretty much in-house by myself for the first year.
Yeah.
Which was a lot and very frustrating. But this year's wrapping up and I have reached out to 2 of my very close friends who you know, N2N and Rich Furness, who are coming in operations with me. And we are going to kick some ass and just have a good time. Honestly, it's great because we're just homies and we just want to have a good time.
Oh yeah. Cheers to that. And you know, for listeners who might not be familiar, because I don't want to categorize Quincy Boy just as kind of disco house, as we were saying. I think you guys have a really unique sound. I think, frankly, if I can be so honest, my favorite release of yours is your first release, I Demand. I think it's probably my favorite release of yours. And, you know, not only you guys don't just do disco house, but you have, I think, this very unique gospel-y quality to a lot of your releases.
I think that's my ear
sampley quality, as you mentioned earlier. You're looking to delve a little bit more into that kind of warehouse. You're like disco house or the warehouse.
Yeah, totally late night disco house.
Yeah,
a little funky, kind of like the drums are getting a little darker. It's gonna get a little bigger room sound, but it's always got a little funky element to it. I love the soulful, you know, sentiment of the vocals and like the feeling of all that, of course. So it's definitely a big part of my style. Yeah. But I think house music in general.
Absolutely. Yeah. And with Rich and End-to-End coming on, what are your guys' plans for the upcoming year, if you would be so inclined?
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to elevate the releases, you know, so they're helping with that. We're trying to build out the branding more and like get more into playlisting, create some of that and build on that. And the live events is something that we're really looking forward to. So we're going to start doing some parties, which we just started doing, which have been great. We're doing really small little parties. They're packing out. People are having a blast. It's freaking like floor to ceiling packed, you know, people standing on the chairs and dancing and having a good time. And honestly, that's all we want. Like, I don't care how big the party is, as long as it's like raging, it's fucking awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been to some of them. Yeah, can attest.
Sweet.
So next, I want to ask, you know, as you go forward, you know, we're sitting here in your studio. Could you walk us through what your creative process is like a little bit, and you know, if you're thinking of evolving or changing that in any way, kind of going forward?
Yeah, I think it's always. I like to do a little bit of experimenting here and there with different things, and like. I think as a DJ, I think one of the biggest challenges, like a producer, is getting vocals, right?
Yeah.
So always trying to be creative on how I do that. But basically what I tend to do is for the last, like, you know, I guess for a good long time now, I usually start with like a drum loop. And now I build out my drums a lot. And I'll almost structure out the whole song with just the drums. And then I'll be like, great, now I just got to fill it in. And I can do the drums and the transitions and really feel it out. And then I could always change it if like, I get a cool sample and I want to like cut some times around or whatever. But like, I'll build it out so I can just try to vibe into it. And that's when you really start to feel like the journey of the music coming in, how like because I usually almost always start with an extended version of the song also. So I can really like make that great and tailor it to also cutting a radio edit of it later. So, you know, I basically framework the drums and then I try to kind of start creating a bass line. Maybe I'll be like, you know what, I'm not getting good ideas here. I'll try some chords or something or some synth sounds. And like, I'm not getting good ideas there. Maybe get a vocal sample. So try to piece one thing in and then build around that. So it's kind of one thing at a time, you know, what's happening from there. Or sometimes I'll be like, let me just take a sample. I have like a lot of my own, because I play a lot of instruments. I have a lot of like little bits that are like piano, bass, and guitar. And I will take a little piece of that, put it into a sampler, chop it up, and then resample it and make like a new groove out of that or something.
Sure. And could you talk, just give us a little preview about, I know we have a lot of music on deck, a little preview about what might be coming up.
Oh yeah, for sure. A lot of exciting things coming up. Kicking off 2023 with a remix that comes out tomorrow on the 13th, Friday the 13th on Legend for legend DeMarcus Lewis, which I'm super excited about. It's been getting a lot of good positive feedback on the promo, so I'm feeling really good about that. Really pumped for that. And then I'm putting out my first single on Quincy Boy called Got a Lot of Love, which actually production-wise is an interesting story. I was telling you about this.
Yeah.
I made the beat and the song was pretty much, I was like, I need a vocal, man. I want to do something epic. And I was like, all right, I got an idea. I hadn't made the beat yet, actually. I had a different track, which was just a rough sketch. And I was like, I'm going to go to Fiverr.com. I'm going to hire somebody who's a songwriter to write a verse and a chorus and give them like just a normal piece of music at like 120 BPM. And I sent it to this guy and he's like, great. Do you want any direction? I was like, you know, maybe like, you know, powerful love. And I was like giving some like examples and stuff and trying to like get some like emotional sentiment out of there that had good energy to it that I could have somebody else re-sing. Mm-hmm. I was like, have you write it and then maybe I can get a dope vocalist on Fiverr. and maybe I can spend like $100 total getting a great acapella.
Yeah.
Because I've had some good luck on Fiverr getting vocals. So this guy records something and sends it back to me. I'm like, holy shit, this sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But the lyrics are not great. I was like, you're a little all over the place because you get to do like a revision. So I did a revision with him. I gave him a little more guidance on it. Because I just like, I've written a lot of songs and like, I don't know, getting a totally different inspiration from somebody else is like just more exciting to me. So I wanted to like reach out. I was like, I'm trying to write something of my own, but I want to see what other ideas come in. Maybe if anything, worst case scenario, it inspires something else and then I can come up with an idea. So I gave him some changes. He makes them, brings it back. And I was like, this is great. And his recording was very good.
Yeah. And
his tone was strong. And I was like, damn it, like this guy's got pipes on him. Mm-hmm. So I get really inspired by it. I dump it into a session. I'm like, what happens if I pitch it up a little bit? And I swear he sounds like a woman pitched up.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way. And it's incredible. And I was like, I'm keeping it like this. And then I made the whole track around that.
I love it. Yeah. I was like, who is she? I was like, I need to know her. And you're like, well, I got a funny story for you.
I got this much vocal. I used maybe that much of it in the song. And I kind of made like a sample out of it, you know?
Yeah.
So it could happen so many different ways. You know, I hired like a female rapper recently. I made a Logic stem, like hip hop track.
Yeah.
That's like 30 seconds. Cause a lot of them are like, I'll give you a hip hop verse for 30 seconds of music for like $40. And it's like, great. So I make a 30-second piece of music. I'm like, here you go. They send you something back. You can do a revision. And then you make a little sample out of it. And you get original samples. And like, as somebody who runs a record label, getting demos of like Loop Cloud or Splice vocals, I'm just like, I'd rather get something original. Make your own shit.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions for you, just kind of a little bit more broader. I think we've covered a lot about, you know, the past and current state of your career, but I want to kind of ask you to look back over the course of your career, and especially, you know, your course of the career as a DJ. And the first question that I want to ask, and this is something that I like, just like to see people's answers. What do you kind of see as the most exciting thing happening in the dance music or house category right now?
Oh man. It's hard to say because like being in New York, there's a lot happening here.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's like thriving right now. And that to me is the most exciting thing. Being here, seeing it, it's happening in other cities, but definitely not like it is here. Denver's got a popping scene. LA, I haven't seen it as much, but that's just my own experience. I haven't been out there as much since like, things have reopened. Excuse me. But honestly, yeah, it's interesting to just kind of see the change here because it went from like full on like really heavy techno, and now it's like house is like more of a thing here. Forget about the pop house crossover. That was like a flash of the pan. I feel like didn't really last that long. Although the Grammys everybody's upset about, but as far as like the scene and shows happening, it's like everywhere, and I love it. I mean, like you walk around Williamsburg into Bushwick and you hear house music everywhere, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And when you kind of think of some of your inspirations in the past, now, who are some of your biggest musical inspirations, or who are you really into right now?
Ooh, right now, let me see. I have different versions, I guess, of that. Like, I'd say somebody that inspires me a lot is Fatboy Slim. Big fan of his. Mm-hmm. And I was going to mention a long time ago on tour, my Cobra days, we were in Santiago, Chile, and I went to see Felix the House Cat in a warehouse, and it was sick. Yeah. It was very cool, very cool. And that was very inspiring. Because, you know, every time I go out, I'm always like studying the music and hearing it. I played a very dope set. Right now, though, I feel like there's definitely some producers that I really like a lot who I play a bunch of my sets frequently. I'd say James Silk is definitely one of them. Mm-hmm. Big fan of George Smettles, Frankie Rizzardo. I love the Honey Dijon album. Mm-hmm. Really big fan of Honey Love, to keep it in the honey context. Yeah. There's a lot of different things happening though. I mean, and that's just like kind of like one corner of it all, but yeah, there's a lot going on. Yeah. There's just always good things happening. So I'm all over the place. Yeah.
Well, the house music world, the dance music world is very vast, broad, and that, as you know, is the mission of Gray Area, to really unite those various pieces of the dance music community under kind of the banner that we all love, which is house music. So, Yeah, I kind of want to finish up with a question before we get into the rapid fire round, because I have some other questions
and
that
a
I
rapid
want to
fire.
ask you. But
All right.
as you look over as you look back at the trajectory of your career, could you just name a couple different highlights? It could be a show you played, a song you released, or even just an idol you got to meet, something someone said to you. What are some of those moments that just stick in your brain?
Okay. I think I released a single on Tool Room that I was really excited about, which is a song called Rejuvenate, featuring Ann Nesby, who's a legend.
Yes.
That felt like a real pivotal moment for me and put me on the map with a lot of like bigger names. Because unfortunately, it was during the pandemic, but I got like insane support on that, and I feel like it put me on the map with a lot of important people. So that to me was really exciting. Crazy. I just hung out the other night with Todd Terry for the first time.
Yeah.
Who's a legend, obviously, right? Mad respect for him. And we were hanging all night. We're talking music, we're talking production and stuff. And at the end of the night, you know, he's like, "Here, take down my number." He's like, "Let's work on some music." He wants me to maybe play some bass lines for him.
I was gonna ask, are we gonna see?
Yeah, we might. I hope so. Todd, if you're
collaboration
watching
soon?
this, man, call me up. You got my number. But we gave a little like bro hug at the end, and he just goes, "Respect." And I was like, cosign.
Yeah. I could die happy.
Yeah, totally. So I was like, that felt monumental. And that was just 2 nights ago. I mean, there's always little wins, you know. I think my journey's had a lot of little wins, and I'm always just like, yes, you know, little wins count because they add up to big wins. And I think there's just, for me, just anything happening is always exciting. Being able to continue doing it is like, you know, just my true love and passion. So it's just always good things in that regard.
Well, that's awesome. And I, you know, I think we've covered a lot of ground and have certainly got to know you pretty well during the course of this interview. But just to round us out, I have some rapid fire questions for you. You can just kind of name the first thing comes off the top of your head, and this is gonna what we're gonna kind of finish up with. Let me know when you're ready, and we'll start firing these off.
Let me get a little sip of juice.
All right, go for it.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
Rapid fire.
Festival or club?
Club.
Ideal BBM for a track?
BPM?
Yes. I'm a little stuffy. Sorry.
That's okay. No. 125.
Coffee, tea, or Red Bull?
Tea. I don't drink caffeine or anything speedy.
Best place to eat in Brooklyn, New York?
Woo! Lilia.
Favorite dessert?
Creme brulee.
What's your rave or club essentials? So what do you have in your fanny pack? Favorite city to vacation?
Spain.
Guilty pleasure TV show?
Guilty pleasure TV show. Emily in Paris. Currently.
All right. Favorite animal?
Cats.
All right. Favorite song on repeat at the moment?
Favorite song on repeat at the moment. Ooh, that's a good question. I would say, is it Everybody on the Honey Dijon album? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that song.
Great track. Next one. What's a track that resonates on the dance floor no matter where you are in the world?
George Smettle's Start the Party. Or Party Starter, whatever it's called.
All right.
I don't look at the names of anything ever. So I don't even know the names of half my own songs.
Yeah. Where's your happy place?
Right in this room, in my studio.
Love it. And to finish us out, finish this sentence. Before I die, I want to blank.
Not live month to month.
Hey, well, I will cheers you to that. Lefty, thank you for an amazing interview. Thank you for being part of the Gray Area crew.
It is an honor.
We all look forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being part of this.
Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure and an honor.